town hall, we will be speaking to five. I mean, five impressive. I mean, I don't even know how else to talk about them. I mean, these are progressive legislative rock stars. I mean, we have Senator Jill Carter, we have Delegate David Moon, we have Delegate Jen Terrasa, we have we have Delegate Julian Ivey, and we have our very own Delegate Sheila Ruth. I mean, these are progressive rock stars, and I am so happy to have them on today to talk about the legislation that they will be presenting, or have are already sponsoring, and to move Maryland forward in a progressive way. Um, as we know, we have been working and fighting to make sure that Maryland is the most progressive state that there is. So I am so glad to have them on. Again, for those of you all who are just joining, my name is Carlos Childs. I am the state organizing director for Our Revolution Maryland. And before we get into it, definitely want to ask if you are joining us through Facebook, please go ahead and click that share and like button. If you're on Twitter, YouTube, I don't even know, Twitch, if we're even on there, please hit that like, subscribe, share, whatever you can. Just go outside and send out a smoke signal real quick and tell your friends about this. This is going to be awesome. Also, as well, since I hate to do this part, but I am asking if you all are able to please donate to our organization so we can not only keep having events like this, so we can also prepare and plan to push, and fight to get all of the legislation that you're going to hear about today passed. These are very important bills, you all. And again, at hey, oh wow, it's 7:30, you all. So I know you are done hearing from Carlos and you are ready to hear from our amazing rockstar panel. Again, we have an amazing panel here for our 2022 MGA Session Town Hall. We will be joined by some amazing legislators. We will be joined by Senator Jill Carter. We will be joined by Delegate David Moon, who, shout out to him and congratulations, is now the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House of Delegates. We will also be joined, right? Thank you, woohoo, for that. We will also be joined by Delegate Sheila Ruth, Delegate Julian Ivey, and Delegate Jen Terrasa. And without further ado, I am going to pass it off to our Revolution Montgomery County co-chair, Kat Yu, to introduce our first panelist. Kat?
Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Delegate David Moon, who represents District 20 in Montgomery County. As Carlos said, he is the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House of Delegates. And as vice chair, we know he will continue to lead a transformational criminal justice reform policies and stand up against powerful police unions. And we are here for him to talk about HB 249. And if you could tell us what that bill is going to do and the impetus behind it.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. Delegate David Moon from Montgomery County. And, you know, we were asked to choose one bill to highlight, and I picked this one. And in many ways, it's a long time coming, and it represents a lot of why I got into this business. So HB 249, it takes cases of wrongful conviction in Maryland and basically requires that we actually review them to see what the heck went wrong and where some sort of misconduct occurred, to refer the judges, lawyers, and police who were handling these cases for professional discipline. Maryland has about 19 or so of these cases where someone has spent time in prison, oftentimes decades, only to be found innocent after the fact. The nation's first DNA exoneration, in fact, was a Maryland case, the case of Kirk Bloodsworth, and he was even on death row at one point. So thankfully, we've gotten rid of the death penalty in Maryland, but we certainly have not gotten rid of the underlying causes and conditions that would lead one to be wrongfully incarcerated for decades. So why else am I highlighting this other than the fact that these cases represent really a catastrophic failure of government, a catastrophic failure of the justice system. In some view, you could fairly argue that this is the equivalent of a doctor amputating the wrong leg, that professionally, maybe it's possible that some of these people are in the wrong line of work. But unfortunately, the national trend has been in these cases that many of these people, in fact, get promoted. They later become judges and the like, and there would be no professional consequences to be had. Now, I'm a lawyer. I went to law school and I took the ethics courses, and I certainly assumed that someone would be following up with me one day if I engaged in professional misconduct, certainly of the likes that sent someone to prison for decades. And after this last year, we are now also paying millions of dollars out of the state treasury to compensate people who found themselves in this unfortunate scenario. And in my email box, I was very pleased to see actually that one of the first people compensated in these cases was the same Kirk Bloodsworth, who was wrongly incarcerated in Maryland. So why is this a long time coming? I was an Innocence Project investigator in law school years and years ago. And when I graduated law school, this was actually a grant proposal that I wrote to try and hold the system accountable years ago. It did not get funded. And in the last year, this whole concept of holding lawyers accountable, holding professionals accountable, came into light when tons of lawyers were trying to basically have a coup in this country. And I was like, my God, Giuliani just got disbarred. And I said, all right, time to dust off the shelf the what should have been an activist tactic to hold unethical lawyers accountable for their misdeeds in the court and their violation of their oaths for professional service in this state. Finally happened nationally in that example, and state attorney generals around the country started filing some of these disbarment referrals in different bar councils. And then in Maryland, this past winter, we had a elected state's attorney retired from office who was disbarred in their retirement because it later turned out that they had withheld information in a case. So no, this is not the most pressing of the criminal justice issues we're going to deal with in Maryland. But the fact that we are now paying millions and no one thinks something's amiss here is very, very problematic. So as soon as I've raised this issue with the same entities, everybody's acknowledging that something went wrong and maybe we ought to do something about it now. So I'm hoping this bill will succeed and we will be able to bring not just accountability for some of the willful misconduct that led these people to prison for decades, but maybe there's a lesson we should learn about how not to let this happen in the future, and that the police departments and prosecutorial offices that touch these cases might want to rethink some of their processes. So thank you for allowing me to share some of my work on this this year, and looking forward to a robust conversation from the rest of the evening. And I actually am curious to hear what Sheila, Ruth, Julian, Ivey, Jen, Terrasa, and my colleagues are working on. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We are going to go to Jake Burdett, who's on. He is president of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County.
Hey, thank you for that introduction, Kat, and thank you, Delegate Moon. And I am also a member of Our Revolution Howard County and Our Revolution Maryland. And yeah, I'm here to introduce Delegate Jen Terrasa, who represents District 13 in Howard County in the House of Delegates. She was actually my delegate until about a month ago when they released these new maps. I'm not sure if those have been voted on yet, but sad that she's not my delegate anymore. But she's in the Environment and Transportation Committee. She's one of the top advocates and defenders of election integrity and fairness, and she's here to speak about her bill, HB 93, which has to do with election integrity and fairness in homeowners association and local municipal elections. So happy to hear from you, Delegate Terrasa. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. I really appreciate the introduction. I'm thrilled to be here with everyone. Yes, this is not something in my committee, Environment and Transportation. This does pertain to election and election integrity. And what HB 93 does is require candidates running in municipalities and large common ownership communities, so your HOAs, co-ops, or condominiums, to report who contributed to their campaigns, how much, and what they spent their money on, just like anybody else running for state office. And it applied, basically, who does it apply to? Candidates in those large HOA, common ownership communities. I keep saying HOA because I live in one, but that it includes all the common ownership communities, or otherwise known as COCs, with 2,000 or more lots, and all municipalities, or it will as soon as I fix that part of the bill in an amendment, but it'll be all municipalities. And basically what it does is it sets up two pathways, and I'll get to why this is important in a minute. But it sets up two pathways. The first is that, my camera went off the wrong way. I'm assuming I'm still here.
Just made you full screen so everyone can see you.
I'm not full screen anymore. Okay.
You are
Well,
now.
good.
We can see you.
You
You're
are
good.
now.
You
We
can see me.
you.
Okay, well, good.
Yep.
That's good enough. Okay, sorry about that. I think I have a touch screen, but at any rate, so basically the way it can work is that the municipality or the COC can set up a financial disclosure system, and that would be as simple or as complicated as they want to make it. And the other way is if the locality doesn't make up a system, then they have to follow the regular state system that the rest of us follow, and that is a little more complicated. It includes setting up a committee, finding a treasurer, opening a bank account, and following the state reporting system. And that might seem complicated in a local race where typically a candidate might only raise 200 or 500 or no money at all for a race. But it might make more sense if a candidate's bringing in 1,000, 5,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000. So my intent is for those smaller campaign contributions, maybe the COC would come up with a super simplified form, like one page where you could just write down a list of your contributions, and another page where you'd write down a list of what you spent it on. And it also allows for the locality to say, to set up different rules depending on how much your contribution is. How much, like if you do under 1,000 or over 1,000, it also allows for a hybrid system where if somebody has less than 1,000 in campaign contributions, they follow the local, and if over 1,000, they follow the state. So essentially what this does is give locals control over how they do it. And it's really about transparency. So let me talk for a minute about why I'm doing this in the first place. And you're probably wondering, like, why would anybody contribute money in a COC and a HOA election? And I kind of wonder that myself. Why would anybody contribute to campaigns running in a local homeowners association? Because you're probably thinking of like your typical 100 units, maybe 150 units, or 77 like my little homeowners association. But this is about huge homeowners associations, which there are a few across the state that have over 2,000 units and really operate more like cities. And those, they own land, they manage large contracts, they do a whole host of things that cities do. But let me tell you what happened in the last election. So typically in those elections, no one has financing or $50. Somebody told me they won their election by buying pencils and handing them out at the grocery store, the local grocery store. I won my election by 178 votes when I ran. And that was basically, and I was not funded. But in the last election, somebody decided to put 100,000, yes, I said 1,000, $100,000 into our local HOA elections. And that was alarming, as you might imagine. And so what I thought was, oh my gosh, there are races across the country where we're talking about people getting involved in small town elections. Here we see it happening right here before my eyes. So I went to Jared Demarinis. He's our the campaign finance guy at the Board of Elections. And I said, can we set this up? And he said, by the way, cities don't have a requirement. I said, what do you mean cities don't have a requirement? So we have no state requirement that cities, our municipalities have to report, the candidates for office in cities report their campaign contributions. So it's different in Baltimore City. Baltimore City is treated just like the 23 counties in Maryland. So take that off your plate. But if a city doesn't have its own requirement, and 12 of them do, but the other 145 cities do not have any requirement for campaign contributions to be reported. So what do cities do? Cities run police departments. Let me just say that again. Cities run police departments and have no campaign finance reporting requirement in Maryland. That to me is alarming. And I would think it would be alarming to all of you. So I made it for both. I made it for both the HOA or common ownership communities and cities. And I could tell you a whole lot more about that if you guys have questions, but that's the bottom line. That huge jump in the COC election that I'm talking about really highlights the need for this kind of reporting. And it's alarming because you don't know it's coming till it's coming, right? So when somebody throws $100,000, fortunately, they were not particularly successful, but they could be. And in this case, it was developers, which might be concerning, but I'm concerned that it could be somebody else. It could be some of your right-wing extremists. It could be people who are concerned about a whole lot of other things that we are not in line with. And it could be too late once you find it out. So that's why I put this in. Hope that that explains the bill, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate Terrasa. And it looks like Liz Fainer said in the chat, so an entity like Columbia Association, well, that's who you're talking about, right?
Well, I am talking about Columbia Association, but there are other large HOAs that function somewhat like cities. And I have not, well, let me say this, we don't have good reporting of HOAs and other COCs. We don't have good reporting as to who they are and where they're operating throughout the state. I think Montgomery County has reporting, they have to report to the county who they are, and there's a tracking system. And I don't know if Prince George's County does, but no other county in Maryland has a reporting system so that people can keep track of them. So it was really hard to figure out who all of them are, but there are a couple others that are super large like that. I know Leisure World is, but Leisure World has sort of a different kind of hybrid election. So I'm not entirely certain it's going to apply to Leisure World. And I could probably talk to somebody from that district to find out more. And there's a couple others that are large, but my contention would be some of these larger HOAs are involved in much more than just architectural violations. Did you mow your lawn? Did you, paint your door the wrong color for the community? Did you? Some of these larger ones are doing a lot more. Some of them have security forces. Some of them owned a considerable amount of land. They run rec and park type systems, et cetera. So they really are, there are a number of them like that, but yes, like Columbia Association, and most of them are not, most HOAs and are not like that, but they're not covered by this bill because they'd be under 2,000 units.
Yeah. Thank you, Delegate Terrasa. But yeah, the one specific example, it happened in the Columbia Association previously. But yeah, so thank you for that. And with that, we're going to hand it over to former congressional candidate and progressive Sheila Bryant, who is going to be introducing Delegate Julian Ivey.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for that introduction. I will be talking today. We will be talking today with Delegate Julian Ivey, who represents District 47A here in Prince George's County. He is on the Ways and Means Committee, and he's continued to be a powerful and vocal voice of holding law enforcement accountable, which is huge right now. So without further ado, Julian, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, Sheila. To all of my colleagues, it really is a pleasure to serve alongside with so many giants. I mean, goodness, we have Senator Jill Carter here. in person. Like, she's literally on the Zoom. Hello. And, you know, Delegate Moon, really congratulations on the new vice chairmanship. That's not just a personal victory for the delegate, that's a victory for the progressive wing of our party here in the Maryland General Assembly. So, you know, I just wanted to first and foremost pass those greetings along. Delegate Moon also mentioned something when he started his presentation, and he talked about how it was kind of difficult to pick one piece of legislation to talk about today. But the reason why I am proposing this legislation again, by the way, it's legislation to end qualified immunity as a defense in civil cases against law enforcement officers specifically. Proposed it last year as well. It was proposed by myself. Delegate Wilkins also proposed very similar legislation as well last year. And I'm not sure if Senator Carter did as well, I assume, because it's right up her alley. But such an important piece of legislation as we talk about trying to change the culture of our police departments. Last session, we made some large sweeping reforms led by Senator Carter, led by Delegate Moon, Delegate Acevero as well, has to be mentioned. And, you know, we've been talking about this specifically for years and years. I think there's a quote from Senator Carter's father talking about why we need to repeal the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights decades ago. And we got that done this year. So, you know, as we talk about things that need to be changed in the future and what we need to do this session, I think that we really do have to stop and, you know, take a moment and celebrate the accomplishments that we made last session. So qualified immunity, it is a form of immunity granted to government officials, officials of the state who are operating under their duties. They can claim some sort of immunity when they're being sued in civil court, saying, you know, essentially, this was part of my duty, therefore, you know, I'm immune to any claims that she may try and file against me. When you talk about changing the culture of a police department, first you need to know that the individuals that are there have really the right mindset, and that they know that if they were to do certain things that have been allowed in the past, that will not be accepted in the future as we move forward. And that just really gives a sense of protection, you know, that there's a new way that we're going to be doing things here in the state of Maryland. Other states have recently moved to do away with qualified immunity. New York City as well, I believe in 2020, passed legislation. New Mexico passed sweeping qualified immunity reforms, which actually bans it as a defense for all elected officials, public officials. And there's something to be said for that as well. But here in the state of Maryland, simply just trying to build off of the momentum that we have, because, you know, it's clear that both sides of the chambers, the Senate, the House, the leaders are really willing to make some changes in a way that, you know, our former presiding officers were really hesitant to do. Quite frankly, you know, no disrespect, you know, we'd had one individual there for so long that he actually implemented some of the legislation that we just repealed. And so elections matter. And, you know, I truly do believe that we're going in the right direction here in Maryland, in the General Assembly specifically. You have progressives like Sheila, Ruth, Jen Terrasa, really stepping up to the plate and moving these issues forward. So I don't want to just talk all night. I could if you'd let me, but I just want to thank everyone for the work that you've been doing. And I hope that you can take a deep breath. This pandemic has just been so tough on so many individuals, activists, you know, organizers, you know, legislators alike. And I think that in this moment, I think it's important that we all just take account for where you are. And I hope that everyone's doing well. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Julian, for that. I have a question first.
Sure.
What is that bill that you're talking about? Is it already presented? Is there a number?
Yeah, so Delegate Moon, Delegate Terrasa, they got their bills in to be pre-filed, it sounds like. And so they've already filed their bills. I'm picking mine up and dropping it in the hopper tomorrow. So for those of you who really want to check, you can look at about 3 p.m. and you'll see the complete list of bills that I'm proposing. One, and I'll be very brief on this, flooding is a huge issue across the state of Maryland. I represent a community called the Port Towns. So you know that we're very close to the water line there. We have a huge flooding issue. So I'm putting forward legislation to expand on some grants to provide funding for individuals who don't even have the money to pay for the repair, and then they get a tax credit for that. So just trying to be able to ensure that low-income individuals can really get themselves ready for the changing environment that we have. So thanks for having me.
Great, and it is coming. I think I have a really quick question. Someone in the chat wants to know who has the power to pass these specific bills, and I guess that would be all of you.
Yes, but it's going to take all of us, both chambers, coming to some sort of agreement. And I mention that because how a bill is introduced. It could be the best bill ever written, and it's going to solve every issue, but it also has to pass the Senate, and that's not always something that's very simple. So again, God bless Senator Carter. Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah. Okay, with that, thanks again, Julian. Next, I'm going to pass it to John for the next guest introduction. John?
Hi, pleasure to introduce Sheila Ruth, Delegate Sheila Ruth, also one of the chairs of our Baltimore County, Our Revolution group, and a friend of mine from that group, although I think we've mostly met on Zoom since 2020. But Sheila, would you tell us about your bill on the Commission for Universal Healthcare? Would you be reintroducing that this year?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And hello, Our Revolution family. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've been involved with Our Revolution, I like to say, since before it was founded, since I helped recruit people for the house parties that kicked it off. I helped to found the Baltimore chapter. So being here is really like being home, and I truly am happy to be here. Like everyone else, I was asked to pick one bill, and it's like asking you to pick one child. It's really hard to do. But I chose the Commission on Universal Healthcare because if there is a signature issue for Our Revolution, it's universal healthcare. And so this bill has been sponsored and championed by Senator Pinsky in the Senate for some years. I think it may have been sponsored by other people before that. It's been around for a while, but universal healthcare is important. And while there are many people working hard, and I have respect for them, trying to get everybody covered under the exchange, I just think that that's not a solution that's going to work. It's not the solution to getting everybody the healthcare they need when they need it, where they need it. As long as you have insurance company profit in the mix, and as long as you have the complex billing of having multiple companies, you're paying more for healthcare than you should be paying. The taxpayers are paying more for healthcare, and the individuals are not necessarily getting the healthcare they need. Not everybody is covered. And of those people who do have healthcare plans, some have out-of-pocket expenses that are so high they can't afford to use them. So what good is healthcare if you can't go to the doctor when you need it? So this Commission on Universal Healthcare bill creates a commission that will then develop a plan and legislation to be introduced to create a comprehensive, affordable, high quality, publicly financed healthcare plan. And so that's important. Publicly financed is really the way we have to go. And to me, it's the only logical solution, because you have one billing entity, you don't have to worry about the profit layer. So, you know, it's the only thing that really makes sense, and you can really make sure that everybody is covered. And this plan requires, you know, everybody in the state to be covered. And so this year, we really looked at this and we made some changes. Do you want me to talk about that now, Jonathan, or am I jumping?
Yeah. What are the updates that you're planning on making to the bill?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry for taking your question away.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, this bill has been around for a while, and so went into it doing some updates. And so one of the things that we've added is incorporating healthcare equity as a goal to reduce healthcare disparities and increase healthcare access, especially in urban and rural settings that have limited access. Also, while I said that the plan is required to cover everyone in the state, and it has said regardless of income, assets, et cetera, we also added citizenship or immigration status to the bill, because it should literally cover everyone in the state, because if everyone in the state is not getting health care, that hurts all of us. And healthcare is a right, and everybody should have the right to get the healthcare they need when they need it. Also added reproductive care as one of the requirements in the plan, including pregnancy, birth control, and abortion services. That's really important. And, you know, we're seeing what's happening, you know, with Roe v. Wade, where it's very likely to be overturned in the next 6 months. Now in Maryland, we're in pretty good shape there because we have abortion rights codified in law, but that doesn't mean that everyone has access. And if you can't afford reproductive care, then the right is meaningless. So this plan would require reproductive care. It also, the changes include a plan for transitioning workers displaced by changes to the healthcare system, because there are people who work for insurance companies who may need to transition to other jobs. The other thing is, in terms of made a few changes in terms of trying to really get it across the line. One thing is that there's been a lot of work done in other states. So we're not starting from square one. And so it requires that this commission look at the work that's being done in other states as a starting point. And one of the biggest problems with this bill has been the fiscal note. And in talking to the fiscal note writer last session, that basically most of the fiscal note is consultant fees for developing the waivers. Now we're likely going to need waivers for the Affordable Care Act, for Medicaid, and presumably for Medicare, although there aren't currently Medicare waivers, that would allow us to collect the federal monies coming into the state. But basically we've modified the bill so the commission will recommend how those waivers might be used, but it's not required to develop the waivers. That would be in the next step. And so I'm hoping that's really going to reduce the fiscal note to where we can really get this commission going and get a plan to introduce in the General Assembly and really get this thing started, because I think it's important to do that. And there are, you know, other people who are championing universal health care. Senator Carter, who was here, is one of those as well. And however we get to universal health care works for me. I think it's important to get there.
So there's a lot we could do with our revolution to support your bill. And do you have any suggestions? I noticed there had been some postings about calling your delegates and senators that you've made.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And so I also don't have a bill number. I will be dropping this by the end of the week, so you should be able to see it by Monday on the bill list, and I'll have a bill number. But I have actually a form that I'm going to drop in the chat. That if you're interested in helping to support this bill, just fill out the form, and I promise I'm not going to spam you. I'll only send you relevant information about how you can support the bill.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So now I'll be introducing Senator Jill Carter. Is that right, Carlos?
That is correct.
Yes, yes, you'll
Good
be
evening.
introducing Delegate. I'm sorry, Senator Jill Carter.
Okay. Well, okay. Thank you. Good evening, Senator Carter. How are you this evening?
Good evening. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Hi. So you're my senator. Actually, I live in Northwest Baltimore, and so I'm proud to say that the last canvassing I did before we went all virtual was for you in Columbia. You represent Columbia also?
Well,
Right?
that was in another race.
Okay. So, but the you'd like to tell us about your bill legalizing marijuana that you're introducing to the Maryland Senate this session?
Sure. So I noticed everybody focused on just one bill. So are we relegated to only one piece of legislation? Even if I'm
No, not necessarily, but would you like to speak about something else?
Yeah, I'll start there, but there are a few other things I want to talk about, but I'll be as brief as possible. So I want to lay out the land, give the lay of the land. So the House of Delegates is proposing a marijuana referendum that process would take a couple of years, and it would not produce a policy, marijuana policy legislation to go along with it. And I think, and many people think that the policy for marijuana, like who gets licenses, who gets access to licenses, where revenues go from marijuana, how we deal with people that have been victims of marijuana prohibition, all of those things are very important. And so the Senate is coming out with a policy piece that would accompany the referendum. And I'll highlight just a few things I think are important. One of them is, and also I want to be clear, there's a whole work group that I'm a part of with the Senate that's coming up with a major piece of legislation. I'm, in addition to the major piece, doing my own because I want to have the leverage, assuming the majority piece doesn't have everything I want, and it doesn't seem like it will. So when we have to look at who gets licenses, we have to make sure that people that are in the medical industry, the rich corporatists that are in the medical industry that have a monopoly on that, don't have a monopoly on the recreational adult use industry. And one of those things, we have to look at different ways that they can enter into the game in recreational, and many proposals are on the table, the majority group and mine, about ways that they can pay high fees to participate into a social equity fund of sorts. And that's one proposal. Another proposal that my bill does is this mentor protege concept that majority companies would have to partner with small and minority businesses that want to get into the industry but don't have the capital up front, and walk them through the process until they're able to stand alone. And then there's so many aspects to this, but another very critical part is the criminal justice piece, making sure that people that are tainted with convictions for marijuana have those convictions vacated. There's different opinions about how to do that. The majority group says expungement. I'm leaning towards something in addition to expungement called vacature. And the reason is New York and 2 other states have done vacature, and vacature says there has never been any conviction. This never happened. Expungement just says, yeah, there was a conviction, but it's all erased now. And vacature is particularly important because people that have immigration issues, a couple of things, understanding that expungement doesn't work for them because completely clearing the record doesn't help them when in the federal system, but vacature would be a better option for them. And so that's just one additional reason why I favor vacature. So it's kind of a new term. We're used to expungement, but vacature is, I think, the better way to go, or at least 2 options for people in this process. And also, of course, the idea that people that are serving sentences. This is the controversial piece that my bill does that the other majority probably won't want to do, is the idea that if there's people that are serving sentences, but they're convicted of something in addition to marijuana, but the basis for their charges and conviction was probable cause based on marijuana smell or possession, then they should also get another look, because it was only the marijuana that would now be legal that created the scenario that caused them to have a conviction for anything. And then finally, the idea about where revenues go with marijuana. There's differing opinions about that. My bill would have revenues be specifically targeted and laid out in the bill to go to those areas most impacted, prioritize those areas most impacted by marijuana prohibition and the failed war on drugs, and create a mechanism where local jurisdictions would have an ability to have say in where those funds would be in their specific neighborhoods. The majority bill doesn't quite do that. It has a social equity office it would create. It's a whole elaborate scheme, and it would be like state government would be deciding where the funds go. And, you know, I don't think that's preferable, because we haven't had a good record of state government deciding issues of equity and having it work out to be equitable. So that's a basic overview of the bill. And if you allow me, I won't go into details, but I'll just mention there's 3 major pieces of juvenile justice reform legislation that are critically important. I also have a bill with Delegate Ruth about transportation equity that's being heard soon. And then finally, this week I have a continuing on police reform, a pension forfeiture bill for those officers that are found to have committed misconduct or convicted of misconduct, that they would have their pensions forfeited. And a myriad of others, but I'll end there.
So we should really be following this developments in the General Assembly closely, right? How do you suggest we do that?
So you know the link to our pages, right? I mean, helpful.
What is that? You mean to your?
So yeah, the link to our pages will have all our bills, and when you click the bill, it'll tell you the hearing date.
Okay.
But the cannabis bill is not yet filed. I'm supposed to be receiving the draft of it tomorrow. The pension forfeiture bills are filed, the transit equity bill is filed, and the juvenile justice bills are filed. But
okay.
they don't all have dates yet.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, how can we follow your bill? You're going to introduce a bill, and there's also going to be that other bill. So there'll be two marijuana legalization bills that we can look at.
Yes. Now, neither is filed yet.
Right.
And I can tell you that with respect to my bill, I've consulted and gone through long meetings with members of the Public Defender's Office to help work out the criminal justice piece, the ACLU, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce for the minority business piece. So it's a collaboration effort of a lot of people that have expertise in certain areas.
Okay, well, we'll look out for it, and let us know how we can support you in that bill.
Thank you.
I believe that Carlos is ready. Carlos?
Yes, thanks so much, Jonathan. And I want to first say thank you to all of the speakers today. I mean, I know I'll tell you all this. It is a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I'm ready to get into it. But before we start, I definitely do want to say thank you so much for joining us. To our other elected officials who are on the other side of the Zoom watching, Delegate Linda Foley and also Delegate Michelle Guyton. If I missed you, I'm sorry. Please put it in the chat that you're here, and I will definitely shout you out throughout the Q&A. So Hal, if you can take us back to regular screen, we can kick this off. So we have a lot of questions. If I'm going to let me see. Okay, so this one, how does beyond reasonable doubt relate to wrongful incarcerated frequency? And I believe this could be directed towards Delegate Ivey, but I'll leave it up for, or Delegate Moon, but I'll leave it up for Anyone?
So I guess there have been 19 unassailably proven or so wrongful convictions in Maryland, and they're going to run the gamut from poor investigation. The cops were sort of stacking lineups in improper ways. We have willful misconduct, hiding evidence, incompetent attorneys. I mean, it's the whole run of it. But at the end of the day, we have a system that we call an adversarial system where one side is not necessarily, the incentive structure is not designed to push them towards the truth. It's an adversarial system. They are trying like the Dickens to prosecute someone, and someone else, it's their job and their duty to get them off. I could go on and on about the myriad ways. I mean, I'm glad Senator Carter is bringing in legislation for law enforcement accountability, right? That's one aspect of it. Delegate Ivey is here talking about qualified immunity and why we shield law enforcement officers and actually lots of government misdoers from personal liability. Again, even for some fairly egregious misconduct. And I'm trying to point to the ways in which we supposedly have licensing rules for the scientists who testify in these trials, for the police, for the psychologists, right? All of these are licensed professionals in Maryland. Again, we all have ethical standards. And it's not clear that on any of the things I'm talking about, the incentive structures are lined up in such a way that they're trying to get to the truth. So is there a reasonable doubt problem? Sure. But even within a reasonable doubt problem, all of these incorrect outcomes are happening. And so that's why, at least for me, and you can see this sort of collective drawing a line in the sand here, you know, ending qualified immunity for convicted wrongdoers, at least disbarring those lawyers who got someone locked up for decades. I mean, right? None of this stuff is happening right now. None of it. So all of these efforts that you're hearing about today, they're part and parcel of the same thing, which is trying to make the justice system work and to make sure the adversarial process does not lead to racially disparate outcomes, that it's not leading to unnecessary incarceration or improper reliance on the criminal justice system and police to handle problems that really they're not set up to handle. Are we willing to look at the facts? Today, I'd like to say I'm hopeful. Again, none of these things have happened. So we need you. Thank you for being here. And let's get it done.
Definitely. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, I think this is towards Delegate Terrasa, is accountability is imperative for citizens to have confidence in our elected officials and laws. Is there a similar law in the civil arena? What happens when state agencies do harm through misconduct? If not, how does one propose change to the law to ensure that there is accountability in the civil arena? And I guess this is directed towards your HOA bill and for the municipalities and really making sure people are held accountable to who they're getting money from.
Well, and I appreciate the question. I don't think it would be through election law, though. I know a lot of I think any of my colleagues could probably speak to that, but it's been very difficult. I know a lot of the committees have been trying to hold the departments, the various departments, Department of Health, somebody jump in, I think Sheila could probably say labor, all sorts of departments that are causing some trouble at this point, have been trying to hold, our committees have been trying to hold them accountable, but it's been very difficult. I don't off the top of my head have a solution to that problem, but I'm open to ideas, and if any of my colleagues have some ideas on that, but it wouldn't be through election law per se.
Okay. No.
I think that may have been directed to Delegate Ivey related to qualified immunity, whereas I think somebody's asking about besides police.
Oh, okay, then So sorry about that. Yes, Delegate, I think you can answer that question. That'd be perfect. Thank you, Delegate.
And I see Jess also had a question about qualified immunity, asking how long it's been in place and if police are the only state employees who have it. I think in the late 60s, there was a Supreme Court case that established this is as law. And, you know, are they the only state employees who have it? Absolutely not. You know, we as elected officials, you know, prosecutors, et cetera, state employees generally have some immunity provisions. It only really shows up in an egregious fashion when you have individuals, you know, who are empowered to use weapons and other forms of violence that Delegate Moon was mentioning just a few minutes ago. And there was the first part of this question that was passed around, and I don't see it, in fact.
Maybe in the answer, the first part of the question I asked for Delegate Terrasa, that's supposed to be for you. Let me see. What happens when state agencies do harm through misconduct? I guess that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
cool.
I think
Definitely.
it's kind of been passed around already.
Definitely. Next question we have is why create a healthcare commission? Just draft a universal healthcare bill. So I guess Delegate Ruth, you can answer that one.
Well, thank you so much for the question. And, you know, like I said, I'm in favor of universal healthcare by whatever means works. And there actually has been a direct bill that will directly create a universal healthcare system. I know Delegate Acevedo has sponsored that. I think Senator Carter, did you sponsor that also? And I don't know if that bill's going to be in again this session or not. And if that passes, that's great. I would say the reason for the commission is politics. That, you know, if a commission can develop the confidence in their work to get this passed, where maybe, you know, a lot of people look at a universal healthcare system and they don't, you know, they don't understand it and they don't think it can work and they think it's too expensive. And so it's just not even being considered. Whereas if we can get a commission passed that's going to look at it, I think of it as being like the Kirwan Commission, and look at how the Kirwan Commission, you know, really delved into education and developed a plan, which was then introduced and has now been passed as the blueprint for education.
Thank you, definitely. The next question, why have a referendum for marijuana legalization? The person asking, as saying, just pass a bill legalizing it by X date, then it's done. So Senator Carter, you're probably the best one to answer that one too. That one. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all. Why have a referendum on legalizing marijuana? Just pass a bill legalizing it by a certain date.
Right, not my call. So that's not the Senate's position, that's the House's position. So I would say beat up on your House of Delegates members, because I don't think it's their brainchild either. It's my understanding it's a leadership decision that the speaker, that's the way that she wants to proceed. And so the way the House of Delegates works, everybody's pretty much going to be beaten into falling into line with that. But, you know, I'm hoping that the two sides will come to a compromise where there'll be a combination of policy bill combined with referendum at the very least. But, you know, that's not the Senate's position. A referendum is not our position.
Let me jump in there too and just say, you know, Senator Carter speaks truth on much of this. You know, years ago, I had the bill and I introduced it in defiance of some folks to put marijuana on the ballot. But again, I was trying to do this years ago. And my theory of the case then was, my God, these people aren't ready to just do it through a vote and a bill. So I'm going to make it easy for them and let them punt it to the ballot. Now you come out years and years later, and I'm stunned to see that Virginia, the heart of the Confederacy, has legalized right under my nose. And the District of Columbia, the voters, in defiance of the federal government, forced the city government to do the same. Though we all know that's tied up by our thanks to our friend Andy Harris. So I've come around to the other position that we ought to just be able to do it. But here's the thing: Senator Carter's also right that the chamber leaders, and in the House it's 141 members, so it's dealing with purple counties and blue counties and everything in between. And I can't tell you the number of people in both parties who told me they secretly had agreed with the bill the whole damn time. Oh, really? Are you gonna vote for it? Well, maybe. I got to get through my primary. It's my first reelect. They got through it. I called them. I say, you ready to put your name on this? No. So that's the political reality of it. That you may see some people who still to this day feel that way. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? This thing is going to pass. We stick it on the ballot. Fine, so be it. The more important thing for me is what does it say? And I joined Senator Carter in hopes that as this referendum bill moves, the Senate is also moving with a number of detailed proposals that somewhere along the way, a consensus emerges on how to move forward with those issues. For me, that's including home grow and maximum equity and redistribution of the funds to those communities that have been harmed. A lot of us feel that way. So I think those are the things to really throw down on at this moment, because a lot of that is an open question. Believe me, there's lobbyists that have been hired. Every licensed medical folks seem to now have a lobbyist, and they're out there. So sleep with your eyes open on this. We're going to have to fight to the mat to make sure the bill is more progressive than our neighbors in Virginia. So thanks again, I know you'll all be a part of this conversation.
Definitely. We do not want to be beat out by Virginia on anything. Now I want to go to Jake Burdett for the next question.
Yeah, there was a question asked in the Q&A specifically about Delegate Jen Terrasa's bill, and I accidentally answered it in the chat, so I wanted to ask it. Mark Imley asked, regarding HOAs, they tend to be far right and need better elections. Like that, he's asking that, like, is that the case? Is that the reason why you're introducing it? So could you touch on what are the potential dangers of not having a bill like yours for HOA elections?
Okay, that sounded like two different questions.
Sorry.
I think certainly HOAs were set up in large part in many areas to be exclusionary. So I think there's definitely a history there. But my concern is that the larger HOAs operate more like cities, and that we know that there's a lot of money flowing into hyper local elections across the country. And we saw a preview of it in Columbia. And I don't think we want to be vulnerable to that in cities. And I don't think we want to be vulnerable to that in these larger HOAs where we saw it explode in a huge way. I mean, to give you some idea, we got 4 mailers to my house, fancy mailers came to my house that were mailed to everyone in my area. And 6 mailers, you guys have seen those mailers. 6 mailers is a lot of, I mean, this was fancy and this was big. And I don't think we want this happening. I don't think we want right-wing folks, crazy folks, all sorts of anti-CRT folks taking over these local boards. But certainly there is already a history of them having a conservative bias.
And without your bill, you wouldn't even know who is funding these people in these elections. So you wouldn't even know if they're right wing or left wing or what.
Right.
Definitely. We're all about getting money out of politics. Our final question, we have the person who's been running the whole back end of this whole thing, Hal. Go ahead, Hal.
So first of all, I just want to say I'm really, really impressed with this awesome group. And I have actually a history with everyone all the guests except for Delegate Terrasa. So it's great to meet you, Delegate Terrasa.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I don't know if Delegate Moon remembers, but I used to do podcasts, and he was one of my guests very early on. He was very gracious to do that. I appreciate it. Delegate Ivey, what an honor to meet you at the immigration rally in Annapolis. We had a great chat, and I just really enjoyed working with Senator Carter last year, and being in the same organization with Delegate Ruth is just a great privilege for me. So thank you all. We've got to keep pushing. We've got to keep fighting. And even though I like all of you and respect all of you, I will continue to try to hold you accountable as best I can. My question for all of you is, how can you create good living wage jobs for folks in Maryland who may not even have a college degree? They may not even be high school grads. Even with college degrees, many folks are struggling. And I think as progressives, we must be committed to all of our residents, and that they all deserve meaningful, fair remuneration and work. So I'll go right down the line. Let's start with you, Sheila, and then go right after that.
Well, thank you for the question. That's a huge question and difficult to answer in a short time. Certainly I think in terms of the minimum wage, we're not moving fast enough. We need to move faster, and we need to stop leaving people out. Tipped workers and agricultural workers need to be paid a fair wage, and we need to index it so that we don't have to keep coming back and raising it. I'll mention, in terms of creating jobs with a living wage, I'll mention my transportation equity bill, which one of the implications of that is if there's equitable transit, that often creates economic development, transit-oriented development, and also direct living wage jobs building, like rail systems and things like that. And in terms of some of the other things we're doing, some of the environmental stuff, we really should have project labor agreements to ensure that people are paid prevailing wage.
Delegate Terrasa?
Yeah, I agree. That is a big, a big question we could spend the whole evening on, but I think we should move fast. I agree we should be moving faster on $15. I also don't think $15 an hour is enough to live on. I think we all probably agree that is still low. I know that we've talked about this in Howard County because of an issue that came up in Howard County with the right to get to be rehired. After a shutdown came up in a hotel there. I think we can support apprenticeships, and we can stop, the state government in particular can stop contracting out things. So I know that's a big issue. And I know there is a bill, I think it's a Mark Corman bill, that for transit, as we move over to EV, this is like a small little thing. It's not a little thing if that's your job, but I mean, in terms of the scope of jobs across the state. But as we change over our fleet to electric vehicles, Mark Corman has a bill to preserve the state jobs instead of contracting out all of the electric vehicle maintenance, et cetera. So I think things like that, and not contracting out all the jobs to benefited positions, part-time, all the other things that government can do with our positions.
Delegate Ivey, thank you so much, Delegate Terrasa.
Absolutely. And, I was listening and I was waiting and I was hoping that she wasn't going to mention it, but apprenticeships and trades, these are really lucrative lines of work that individuals can go into without having to go into debt, going to college. I graduated from college, so let me just say that up front. But while I was in school, a friend of mine who played on the baseball team, didn't go to college. He went into an apprenticeship program. It was either plumbing or doing electrical work. And he was telling us, about the new lease that he had just taken out, and that he was doing really well. And so there are ways that you can provide for yourself, provide for your family without going, the route of higher education. And you shouldn't think any less of that. And specifically, as we have more funding for infrastructure projects coming from the federal level, the state of Maryland as well, looking to transition away from fossil fuels. We're going to need electricians. We're going to need individuals who can lay the new piping, et cetera, to make these changes to our infrastructure. So, of course, not the only solution, but one of them.
Thanks, Delegate Ivey. And let's just finish with Delegate Moon, and then we'll quickly wrap up. Thank you so much.
Great. So what the heck do we do about this? I got to start with one of the obvious ones. Don't let Democrats get away with poor positions on economic justice. I think that's why we're all here having this conversation ultimately. And it's at least a part of what brings us together. The more I look at the world and what's going on with Biden and inflation and everything, I just, we have got to get to a hardcore focus on expansion of universal benefits and really the affordability of life and living, childcare, housing, health, dental, vision, mental health, all of this. The needs are obvious. I think part of this also means maxing out the organizing opportunities and the organizing moments that are currently being created by the Great Resignation. I'll be damned, for example, if we don't get out of this session without a paid family leave bill. With everything going on, like, my God, that's like the bare minimum at this point. And yet we need to set expectations. Some of us have wondered, when the Republicans come knocking and talking about 41, successive tax and fee increases from the Democrats, what does life look like for the better for the average Marylander after 4 years if we win the next governor's election? After 4 years of rule under Democrats? Can you answer that question? At the moment, I can't. And I hope that this conversation is part of helping answer it. So I think we got to get out there and obviously at the same time do everything we can to stop corporate influence on our elections and industry capture of our committee work. I am encouraged by the movement of organizing new shops and sectors that appears to be happening, even in untouchable places like the Starbucks and Amazons of the world. So I think all of this has been a terrible 2 years for humanity, but born out of this, I think there's some lessons and some hard organizing opportunities that we would be remiss not to jump at, and they go right to the heart of your question, which is helping ordinary folks and folks without the greatest of means.
Thank you all so much. Carlos, thank you so much for this great panel, and I'll turn it over to you to close it out.
Yeah, that last question, all the answers that just scratched everyone's progressive itch that they've had for really firebrand politics. So I love it. You all five of you, Senator Carter, Delegate Moon, Delegate Terrasa, Delegate Ivey, Delegate Ruth, you all have been incredible. I want to again extend as many thank yous as I can give for taking your time out of your busy schedule to be here today. Thank you all so much. We are going to go ahead and wrap it up with Hal. Actually, I don't know why you brought me back on, but Hal, if you can go ahead with the national report, and then we can go ahead and wrap it all up.
Yeah, I was going to just forget about that national report, but real quick, let's just share that screen. Thank all the folks for being on board, and we'll close out with our chant, which is when we organize, we win. So I'll say it once, you'll say we win, I'll say when we organize, and we'll say have a great evening. When we organize,
we win.
Have a great night, everybody.